Hello and welcome to the Rangers Rabo breaking news podcast. As everybody's probably seen by now on social media, Nathan Patterson has left Rangers and signed for Everton in a club record deal. I'll come to you first, Wolf. Did it just sort of feel a bit inevitable after the last couple of days?
Yeah, I think we've just been counting down the hours until it was announced. I mean, Everton are obviously keen. I mean, they came in for him in the summer with 2 or 3 derisory bids, so they're obviously very, very keen. I mean, I know they don't really have a right back as such, so I think he'll probably go straight into the starting team as well. Um, I think it's a great deal for the lad, great deal for Nathan. I mean, he'll get a serious chunk of change every month in his in his bank account, so got to be good for him. It's also good for Rangers. I mean, we had to show people that we're not going to lowball people when we sell them now. They're not going to get them for buttons,
Yeah.
and we had to sell somebody and to bring in £12 million, most of it up front, I believe, without directly affecting the first team. That's a hell of a bit of business.
I'll come to you next, John. In terms of obviously the fee, is that such an important thing for Rangers to get that big fee for Nathan, or do you think it didn't really matter as long as the first player that left went for that big fee?
Aye, that's exactly what it is. As long as it was value for money, because that's one thing that we've been terrible at doing. And I don't think we can disagree too much. It's the one thing Celtic have kind of led the pathway on now. Celtic have set the stall out and told people what they're worth. Celtic, whilst we were not in the league, got a few low ball players stolen from them. And if you look at what Van Dijk went for example, but they've now dug their heels in with the likes of Tierney, Edwards, Dembele, and even Aya into his last year's contract. So that's what we had to do. And the fact that we've got 12 million up front for a boy who would have had to wait 2 or 3 years. Like, I've seen a few people say, is it the wrong time? Is it the wrong decision? Should it have been Patterson? If we put Patterson in the first team and dropped Tavernier, for example, we'd be selling Patterson next year without a right back backing him up. So it was the right player for great money, and I think just everyone seems like it's the right fit. I just listened to some of his interview there, and he's just talked about how much Everton made it clear back in the summer they wanted him to be a first team starter right away, and I think that's what sold it for him. So I think it's one of these ones where there's no animosity on any side. I think it suits literally every party perfectly for this to go the way it's went.
I'll come to you next, Brian. Obviously, now that Nathan's left, I know it seems a bit of a strange comment to make, but obviously it's not really hurting the first team in terms of obviously Tav's basically the first choice, he's the captain. Is it just one of those deals that John talks about that just makes a lot of sense for all parties involved?
Excuse me. I think it does. I mean, as John was just saying there, the money's right. Nathan's obviously wanting to progress. He's wanting to play first team football. And Rangers have finally got a deal for a guy that's what he's worth. As John was saying, we've lowballed up when we lost Gilmour for pennies. We've lost a few other guys for basically nothing. So it's nice to get a good deal for a guy. And as you were saying, good luck to the guy, because there's no animosity. He's a great kid, and we just wish him all the best.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly echo those comments. I've obviously watched Nathan since he was kind of 15, 16. He was very raw. And to be honest with you, he was quite small, and I think that was one of the kind of worries with Nathan, that he was quite small. But over the kind of next 3 or 4 years, he gradually kind of grew a bit. He became a bit more physical. You could see that he had that sort of style like Alan Hutton. He was very much sort of marauding up and down that side of the pitch. And in the end, when he made it into the first team, it probably wasn't that much of a surprise. But obviously, to see him go on to become the first choice for his country, the fact that whenever Tav was out of the team, Nathan came in and made it look very easy, like he'd been doing it for years. I wish Nathan all the very best. Wolf, when you look at obviously that money that the club's brought in and what we can do with it, do you think it's a no-brainer to then go out and sign another right back, or do you think that the club will look in-house to try and bring somebody in?
I don't think we'll go out and sign another right back as such, because you've got Balogun who can deputise at right back if anything happens to Tav. If Tav gets injured, and Sod's Law tells you he'll get injured at Pittodrie. But so Balogun can fit in there. If we can get Ryan Jack fit, he's played at right back. To look at somebody in house, you're probably talking about young Adam Devine in the B team, and I like Adam. I think he's a terrific player from what I've seen of him. But I think it's a hell of a step up for the lad.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't do him any harm to get him involved in the squad. Get him in and about the first team. I don't know if he's one of the guys that's been training with the first team, but I would certainly look at getting him in and about, because he could be the next Nathan Patterson coming through. But I mean, to me, the money that we've brought in, we should be looking to increase the contracts of some of the guys that have got 18 months left. Rather than sitting saying, well, if they don't go in January, come the summer, you've got guys like Aribo, Kent, they've got 18, they'll have a year left by then. Let's try and get them tied down to longer contracts, so that if they go, we get serious money for them.
Yeah, fair enough. That was going to be my next question to John. Do you think it's important that we now use this money to keep the important players at the club, like Kent, like Aribo, etc., or do you think that because there's a new manager in place, we might get into the transfer market and look to add a couple?
I don't really think, from what I've seen Van Bronckhorst do, that we're desperate to add players to the squad. I think he's still trying to figure out who's what. One of the real advantages of this winter break being brought forward is Van Bronckhorst hadn't had a spare week. The first time we had a spare week was our last home game, so that was the first day we'd have probably had 3 training sessions in 1 week without a midweek game and all the rest period. So we don't know what a Van Bronckhorst side might look like, having had 3 weeks on the training ground and had been able to actually implement his ideas, because we'd seen very little until that St Mirren game, and it looked like everything had just been integrated in one week. The pressing, everything looked good, everyone looked lively. And even Scott Wright's one of those fringe players still that's not even got the specific run in the side. I think the squad's really, really good. The only thing that worries me is this African Cup of Nations, which is going to take potentially 3 of our best players. That's the only concern. But when you look at the squad we've got, I don't think you'll sign a right back, as we've said. You've got Helander coming back. I know it will take him weeks to get back into the full swing of things, but that then gives you your cover there. I know Jack Simpson's not exactly it, but you've got cover at centre half if you need it. You have Bassett move to left back. I think it is what we've said. Tie down those contracts, because that's investment in people that we're going to be able to sell on for even more money. And then we need to get into a cycle of how we then find a Nathan Patterson or a position within the youth team that's going to move in to our team, and we start really recouping and making Rangers an actual business model. Because the one thing we don't like to admit is that we're going to need to be, if we become self-sufficient, going to need to be a feeder club for English teams. That's realistically what we need to be doing with our players, is bringing them in young, developing them, even if that's people we sign, and selling them on for huge money. The thing with Patterson that seems to be maybe a wee bit understated is he was at Rangers for 12, 13 years. He's been there since he was 7, 8. That's a lot of time and money that the club puts in to maybe get one player out of that generation. We should have had Gilmore that went for money as well. Yeah. But it costs millions to run your academy every single year, and you need to get the timing perfect. And even on this, we didn't get the timing perfect because we created a right back when we had our captain be our best player at right back. So there's going to come a time and place when Rangers are going to get the right player or the right 2 or 3 players for youth team that come in positions that we need, and they're just going to take off. That's really what's hindered us previously. So I'm hoping that, I still think Stephen Kelly's one that we need to be pinning some hopes on, but it just seems like maybe a bit down the pecking order just now. But I don't expect us to spend the money. I think it's better spent on players' wages.
No, I think you're spot on, and it's scary, if Billy had signed his deal with Rangers, and if you had sold Billy a couple of years down the line, I mean, I think Billy would have probably broke some type of record when he left Rangers, and I think that's the thing. And I know people, including myself, want to see more young players breaking through, but when you think about the talent that obviously Billy Gilmour's become, and I have no doubt that Nathan will go on and become a really good player at Everton, to pick out like those 2 guys out the last kind of 3 or 4 years, the Rangers could have been looking at maybe 30 or 40 million pounds between the 2 of those guys, which is why the academy is so important. And we need to keep finding these gems. We need to keep obviously developing these type of players, because it's basically the stronghold of the club, isn't it? Like, these guys aren't costing as much money as it would to go out and spend millions of pounds on a player. A lot of the work's done in-house, and then if they develop enough into the first team and we sell them on, it's just pure profit. Like Alan Hutton was pure profit, etc. And this is where the club has to go. And as John points out, Brian, in reality now, like, we need to bring players in, we need to develop them, and then more than often they are going to go to a top English club, aren't they?
More often than not, yeah. I think the good thing about this is, though, it shows all the youngsters at Rangers that there is a pathway to the first team, and if they do well, they will get bought if they're good enough. I think that's obviously been a problem for a long time now, that we just haven't hardly put any youngsters in, and it's just been old guys and old contracts. But I mean, as John's saying there, the big ones now are the Rebos and the Kents. We need to get them up signed, and if somebody comes in for them, then it's stupid money that we're asking for them.
It's interesting. I'll not go into too much depth about obviously like the sort of potential new signers from America because I'm pretty sure none of the forays know a hell of a lot about them. Hopefully, we're going to get somebody on that actually covers the MLS to maybe talk a little bit about them. In terms of the boy James Sands, I'll come to you, John. He seems like quite a versatile player. Is that the sort of player that we need for the squad? Somebody that can maybe play centre back, right back, and in midfield?
It can do a lot of what Matt Polster does, and to be fair, he's probably had a very similar season to Polster did with New England at New York. I only seen him in a couple of games. I seen him against Philly Union. He looked very tidy, but in that game against Philly Union, they had like 14 players out with COVID. So I reckon I could have slotted into midfield and looked pretty tidy in that game. But he looked technically really good. But the type of things you would expect. I mean, Matt Polster he was never massively impressive, but he looked technically all right. Looked like a decent footballer. Moedu done a lot of the similar stuff. It looks like James Sands can play, same area, very type of similar upbringing, came through the college system, looks very, very tidy, technically good. It's just, you can never tell. Scottish League's so unique. People take the piss out of our league all the time. You need to be switched on. We get academy players for Man U, Arsenal, and they just can't cut it because it's so fast. You can have all the technique in the world and all the vision in the world, but until some Scottish 18-year-old midfielders run at you full pelt non-stop all game, you're never going to know what people are cut out of, man. But he wants to join us. He's had a good season. He's won the MLS. Only see.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually talking to Wolf like prior to the podcast. When you look at the MLS now, there's clearly a lot of money invested in that league, and there's clearly a lot of young American talent now moving abroad. I think one of the players, was it yesterday or today, moved to the Bundesliga for about $20 million. Which, let's be honest about it, you know, for a long time people mocked the MLS and said it wasn't the highest standards of leagues. But when you see them now signing like full Argentinian internationals at the age of 19 and 20, you know, like so the world's changing, and maybe we have to kind of look at these leagues and accept that, you know, if we can bring somebody like this kid in on an 18-month loan deal, Rangers will obviously pay a fee for that. But is that the sort of leagues that we need to start looking in now, Wolf? And maybe it's not just like your main leagues in Europe. We do have to look at America, maybe Mexico, etc. You know, is this just things that we have to accept moving forward, that that's the sort of markets that we'll look into?
I'm not sure about Mexico. We've not got a great track record recently with Mexicans, but yeah, I mean the North American league's seems to be a lot better than, as you say, it's given credit for. I mean, we've done a bit of this in the past because we've been to like sign players from Croatia and Austria and places like that, which aren't really the leagues that Scottish clubs tend to look at. Yeah. You know, but I think what we're doing with the you know, the current director of football and his team, they do seem to have a great network of contacts all over the place. You know, I mean, the only place I don't think we're really tapping just now is Africa, although we're getting African internationals, but we're signing them from elsewhere. So I think the net is out, but I mean, I'd be a bit wary of Mexico. I'm still scared with Carlos Pena, but apart from that, I think
No, I think it's a fair point. Obviously, the whole Mexican transfer thing with obviously Herrera and Pena probably didn't work out, but there is obviously a lot of talent in that country and a lot of really special young players. I'll come to you, Brian, just on a kind of quick point. See, when you see Rangers being linked with players as guys that we don't really know, do you think that worries supporters because maybe we don't see them in like La Liga, we don't see them in the Bundesliga?
Not necessarily. I mean, just because we've not heard them doesn't mean they're not any good. Yeah. We've obviously got to distrust the scouting network and Ross Wilson and his team, that they know what they're doing and they're going to scout these guys thoroughly and get value for, you know, obviously buy them cheap and then do what they've done with Patterson. But obviously we didn't pay a fee for Patterson, but similar sort of thing. We get these guys cheap, we produce them and develop them and then sell them on for big money, and that's just a continuous cycle. We just keep doing that.
Right. I'll come round you all once more just with a quick question about this transfer window. Is there a fear that we maybe lose one other big player this window, Wolf, or do you think that's just what's going to happen over the next 6, 12, 18 months, that obviously guys will move on and we will replace them?
Guys will certainly move on in the next 6, 12, 18 months. I'd like to think that the sale of Nathan Patterson for 12 big ones to Everton will mean that we don't lose anybody else. But obviously, if a ridiculous bid comes in, I mean, if somebody comes in with, say, 20 million from Morelos, for example, you know, you can't turn that down. He won't want to turn that down, he'll be away. But it would have to be a ridiculous bid. I think that the guys that are currently what you would call first team regulars, I don't think we'll lose any of them unless, as I say, unless somebody comes in with a really, really silly bid.
Brian, what about yourself? Is there a fear that we might lose like an Aribo or a Kent this month, or do you think that one sale will be enough, or is it just like one of those ones where if somebody comes in and offers a really large amount of money, we just can't turn it down?
I would like to think that the 12 million will sort of keep everybody at bay, but as both just said there, if somebody comes in with an astronomical bid, it's just impossible to turn down. I'd like to think there's nobody else going to go this window bit for big money, but you can say that one day and then the next day there's a huge bid on the table. So it's just, you've just got to hope by the 31st of January that we've kept the core of the players, and then obviously the summer takes care of itself, because that's when everybody likes to do their business.
Yeah. John, I'll come to you because I know you quite like being controversial. See, when you look at obviously the fee that we've now got for Nathan, what does that make somebody like a Rebo or a Ken or a Kamara worth to us now? Like, sort of, what are the ballpark figures do you think that an English club would need to offer us to take those players away?
I think it really depends. I think Patterson's maybe a wee bit more unique because he's got all that youth on his side and he's kind of thrown in. I think the biggest thing with Patterson is playing for Scotland has probably increased his value tenfold as well, which isn't happening for a whole lot. I mean, Kamara's been at Euros. I don't know how Kamara could be undersold for anything less than that now. I've never really bought into that when I've seen people writing papers, and I've even seen some Rangers people say that Kamara will maybe go for 10, 12 million. I'm like, in what world are we selling Glenn Kamara for £12 million? Like there's average English Championship midfielders going for 20, 25 million, and that's what we're doing now. That is the ballpark. So no, everything now is 15 million above. Nobody in that team, unless there's a massive drop in form from someone and just looks disinteresting, it suits all parties to get out. Our key players are going for 15 million plus every single time now, as long as they're within a contract. But even if a Rebo and that didn't sign the deal in the summer and somebody came in, you'd still be going for that higher money and going, no, it's 15 million for a Premier League club. That's what their going rate is. Doesn't matter if it's 12 months, more valuable to us to keep them and run them out sometimes. That's what I'd be looking at. But I mean, Rangers are going to weigh this up. I'm with Wilf, I'm with Brian. This Patterson deal was the one sell we had to do, and it suited everyone. It wasn't hindering the first team. We get great money in. We can go secure contracts, so we can continue, and we should still be pushing for the title, even if we don't sign anyone. I think there might be a couple of pre-contracts we now go and try and get over the door. I know Suter keeps getting spoken about with Celtic, but I'd be very surprised if we're not looking at him. Very surprised if we're not looking at him.
I think one of the points here, somebody saying Nathan Patterson could potentially be worth £30 million this time next year. Well, I think yet again that's why the club and a lot of the chat's been about also getting a sell-on fee.
Yep.
So when you look at the money that Celtic got for Van Dijk, they pretty much got as much when they moved to Liverpool as they did when they sold him. So with Nathan Patterson, if Rangers have got even 10, 15, 20%, I don't know what the fee is, we're obviously just kind of surmising here. But if Rangers get another 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 million pounds for Nathan Patterson, it turns into a £20 million deal for a kid that had played, 20 first team games. So I think for us, it's a no-brainer, and obviously we wish Nathan all the very best because he's a kid that's gone through the academy. He was a big Rangers fan. Like you saw that he enjoyed every time Rangers scored. He was always one of the first guys celebrating in the stands with the supporters. We wish him all the best in the future. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We're actually back tonight at 7 o'clock with another pod. This one has just been a quick throw in because of what's happened. And if you stay with us as well, hopefully we'll have this interview with a guy who's been covering the MLS. We can talk a little bit about James Sands if that deal is confirmed quite soon. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you all again very, very soon.